Is this shoe a knockoff? Well, on today's English lesson, I am going to teach you about a knockoff, and I have a list of other fun English phrases and vocabulary words you need to know. Well, hello, all of my students. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Jay, and I have an English through story lesson. I hope you're ready for a little learning and laughter. I am going to read through today's story at a slow pace and explain the key phrases and vocabulary words that you need to know. So let's get ready for some learning and laughter, and let's dive into today's lesson. Calvin, who worked the night shift at the local Waffle House, always had a side hustle up his sleeve. So notice Calvin worked the night shift. So here in America, if you work for someone, there are primarily three shifts: the morning shift, the evening shift, and the night shift, which is also called the graveyard shift. So the night shift is usually maybe 5 or 6 o'clock to 5 or 6 in the morning. The first shift, or the morning shift, is usually 7, 8, or 9 a.m. to about 5 p.m. Second shift is usually like 5 to 11. And the night shift can be from 6 until 6 in the morning, or it can be from 11 at night to maybe 7 in the morning. Okay, so the Waffle House. Notice Calvin worked at the Waffle House. Now, if you ever come down south, the Waffle House is a very famous restaurant that you need to go by. They serve breakfast foods 24 hours a day, and they serve other type foods like hamburgers, or what they call patty melts. Okay, hamburger meat in between toast on a grill, and it's really good. And you'll find Waffle Houses in southern states like Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. They may be in South Carolina, okay? But as I've traveled north, they don't have as many Waffle Houses as I see down south. So they stay open all the time, and someone's always in there. Now, notice Calvin was at work, and he was working the night shift, but notice he always had a side hustle up his sleeve, okay? He had a side hustle up his sleeve. So a side hustle is when you are trying to make extra money outside of your main source of income. So if I work at a restaurant, my side hustle may be cutting grass, okay? Or my side hustle may be painting houses, okay? So it's something that you do outside of your main way of making money. Now, he had a side hustle, notice, up his sleeve. Up his sleeve is a phrase that we use to describe that someone always has something that they're doing. Okay, I got a trick up my sleeve. Okay, so I have something that I can do. All right, I have a side hustle. I have another job. I have an idea. Okay, so it's something that you may have in addition to something you may offer. Okay, let's find out what happens. This is going to be funny. One slow evening, he pulled me aside with a grin and asked if I wanted to buy a limited edition Rolex. Okay, a slow evening. So there wasn't that many customers at the restaurant on that particular evening. Now, Calvin's supposed to be making pancakes and eggs and grilled ham and sausage and bacon. And now all of a sudden he wants to sell me a Rolex. A limited edition Rolex. Something looks a little skeptical, okay? Let's go on with the story so I don't tell too much. The moment he said it, I knew something was fishy. Fishy. Something was fishy, but Calvin swore up and down that the watch was legit. Okay, so imagine if you're out at a restaurant and the waiter or waitress wants to sell you a Rolex. You would say something is fishy. Okay, this is not ordinary. This is very, very unusual. Okay, it's like a person that's usually mean to you all of a sudden being nice. So you're saying, something's fishy here. Why are you being so nice to me all of a sudden? Okay, so you're skeptical or you're weary of something being honest. Okay, now notice Calvin swore up and down, okay, that the watch was legit. So when somebody swears up and down, they're making you a promise. Man, I'm telling you, this Rolex, it's real. Can't you see it's shiny? I swear up and down, baby. It's the real thing. You know, they're coming off like a con artist. Could you imagine Calvin making waffles? Yeah, I got this Rolex I want to sell you, baby. I know I'm at work and it's 2:00 in the morning and I'm making these fries and potatoes, but I got a Rolex that's worth over $20,000. I give it to you for 200. I give it to you for 200. He swore up and down that it was legit or it was authentic. It was real. But I have a feeling that Calvin is probably lying. Let's find out what happens. He placed it in my hand like he was handing over buried treasure. Okay? He didn't want anyone to see it. But it felt cheap enough to give up the ghost. Okay? So he placed it in my hand like he was handing over buried treasure. So, in other words, Calvin was like, look, man, this is precious, man. This is very, very valuable. Okay, but once I got it in my hand, it felt plastic instead of gold or stainless steel. And it was cheap enough, notice, to give up the ghost. In other words, it felt like it was a dead watch. It wasn't ticking. It was old. It was probably outdated and looked very, very cheap. Not something you would want to buy from a restaurant employee. Calvin kept talking a mile a minute, trying to butter me up with promises of a family discount. So when someone is talking a mile a minute, they are talking real fast. They're not slowing down. They're trying to teach you English and they're talking like this. They don't want you to understand. They just want to say something. They don't want to pause. They want you to hear them and hear them well. I was talking a mile a minute, talking very fast. So you were like, Calvin, slow down. Could you imagine Calvin? Notice trying to butter me up, trying to make me think that the watch he was selling me was real when it was obvious that it was a knockoff. It was a fake. A knockoff is something that looks real, but it's really not. Okay? And he was promising a family discount. In other words, Calvin was saying, look, I'll hook you up on the price. You could get this in the store for $20,000, but I'm going to give you a discount for $200. You can get $18,000 off, son. Calvin the con man, okay? That's what I'm going to call this one. Calvin the con man. When I asked for paperwork, his confidence started to crack at the seams, okay? Can you find the compound word in this sentence? A compound word is two words in one. I'll give you 3 seconds. 2, 1. Paperwork. 2 words in one, paperwork. So when you buy a Rolex or another timepiece, they don't call them watches, they call them timepieces. They usually come with papers that will authenticate the investment that you're making, okay? So you'll get paperwork from Rolex that says this is a genuine watch, genuine timepiece. It has this particular metal. It's made out of this. It was made here in Switzerland, or it was made here in Germany, wherever it would be. So the paperwork would prove that it's not a knockoff, okay? Notice when the paperwork was asked for, his confidence seemed to crack at the seams. So when something cracks at the seams, that's a phrase that we use to describe that something is not valid, something is not good. Okay, I wanted to be able to tell if my daughter was telling the truth. And when I asked her a question, I noticed she began to crack at the seams. I began to see her lip tremble, sweat coming down her forehead. She was cracking at the seam. Okay, when the criminal was taken to the police station for questioning, his alibi began to crack at the seams. We knew he was a suspect. Okay, let's continue. He insisted it was hot off the market, but the misspelled logo told a different story. Now, usually when we describe something being new, we say, oh, it's hot off the press, or it's hot off the market. But when we describe something as being stolen, we'll say that watch looks hot. Okay, it may be real, but you probably stole it, sir. Okay, so it had a misspelled logo on it. We're wrapping the story up. I handed the watch back and told him I wasn't born yesterday. I love saying that. I was born at night, not last night. And Calvin just laughed. I say that to this day. You know, when you tell someone I wasn't born last night, you're basically saying, look, man, I'm not stupid. This is a fake watch. Again, I like to tell people I was born at night, not last night. I handed the watch back to him and I told him I wasn't born yesterday. And Calvin just laughed, admitting he had to make ends meet somehow. Make ends meet. He had to make some money, even if he lied and was being dishonest. Calvin felt like he had to make some money somehow. As I walked out, I couldn't help but admire his ambition. Even if the watch was a knockoff, that wouldn't fool a blind man. Okay, so when he admired his ambition, he was basically saying, hey, you got to admire him, man. He may be working at Waffle House early in the morning, but he's trying to do more with his life. Okay, that's ambition, when you're trying to be more successful, productive, or excel in life. And you're not going to let your present circumstance hinder you or stop you. Okay, now one phrase we use, I've already explained what a knockoff is, but notice that wouldn't fool a blind man. So when we use that phrase, that doesn't fool a blind man, you're basically saying anybody can see that that watch is fake. Okay. Jay, you have $100? I'm broke. Come on now, you can't fool me. Even a blind man can see you got $100. So that's a way we use to describe that you're not getting over on me. Even a blind man can see. Okay? Let's read through that story without stopping. Now that I have explained all of the key vocabulary words and phrases, okay? Let's dive back in. Calvin, who worked the night shift at the local Waffle House, always had a side hustle up his sleeve. One slow evening, he pulled me aside with a grin and asked if I wanted to buy a limited edition Rolex. The moment he said it, I knew something was fishy, but Calvin swore up and down that the watch was legit. He placed it in my hand after he was handing over. He placed it in my hand like he was handing over buried treasure, but it felt cheap enough to give up the ghost. Calvin kept talking a mile a minute, trying to butter me up with promises of a family discount. When I asked for paperwork, his confidence started to crack at the seams. He insisted it was hot off the market, but the misspelled logo told a different story. I handed the watch back and told him I wasn't born yesterday, and Calvin just laughed, admitting he had to make ends meet somehow. As I walked out, I couldn't help but admire his ambition, even if the watch was a knockoff that wouldn't fool a blind man. Well, that's going to do it for today's English lesson. I know I have taught you at least 8 new vocabulary words and phrases. I want you to take the time to tell me a brief story down in the comments section. Have you ever had a knockoff? Or have you ever had someone try to sell you a knockoff? Let me know about your experience down in the comments section. I remember when we went to New York, I think it was last year, they actually have people on the sidewalks selling knockoff purses, knockoff belts and wallets. They look like Gucci, but they were knockoffs. So let me know your story down in the comments section. And as always, if today's lesson has helped you, all I ask is that you share it with a friend, send them the link, and let them know that Jay will help to improve their English vocabulary, comprehension, and vocabulary. And we'll have some fun while doing it. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And as always, I hope you join me on my next English lesson. I hope to see you then.